Learn to figure out what kind of book you want to write, just like a pro. Just like a pro would do in contemplating writing a new book. Hey everybody, welcome to another session of Walking with Randy. Well, I've waited so late this time to finish up my 10,000 steps. I have about 1,000 left to go. I'm having to finish them up here inside. Well, we have 3 questions you can ask that would help you to clarify what kind of book it is that you are contemplating writing. One of the most basic things that you can do to write like a pro is to clarify what kind of book you want to write. Well, let me explain by discussing 3 questions. First of all, do I want a fiction or nonfiction book? Do I want to write primarily fiction? If so, then you will be telling a story. And if you want to write primarily fiction, then you will want to delve into some study of a particular term. And that term is called the hero's journey. Now, we don't have time to go into it here tonight, but that is something that you would want to find out more about if you were going to be writing primarily fiction. And in later sessions, we will talk about the hero's journey. But you use a lot of elements of storytelling whenever you are doing fiction. Well, do I want to write primarily nonfiction? It may be a how-to book. It may be a descriptive book. The house that I'm in right now is built largely from nonfiction books that were descriptive books, and they were how-to books also. You can still, though, in many nonfiction books, use many narrative elements or elements of storytelling to illustrate your points within the nonfiction books. Now, some people ask about memoirs, telling your own story, your own life story. Well, unless you are already nationally known, it may be kind of difficult to market a book about your own life story unless you have had a tremendous earth-shaking event that has happened to you and that characterizes your story. Well, now here's another way that you can do that, though. You can tell your own story in a lot of unusual ways. And one of the ways to do it is to simply come up with your nonfiction book and then tell your own story on illustrating the points from your nonfiction book. You can tell much of your life by doing that, and it will be interesting to your readers. The second question is, do I want a digital book or do I want a print book? Now you may say, well, of course I'm thinking about a print book. I'm talking about a book. So why would I even mention a digital book, or otherwise known as an electronic book or EBook? Well, in 2011, in Amazon.com in 2011, and it held true in 2012, the sales of digital books surpassed that of print books. So you may want to consider publishing your book and writing your book simply in the form of a digital book. Another thing about a digital book is that it may be much shorter than a print book. In fact, some digital books are only 8 or 10 pages long. Most of them are longer than that, 25 at the starting point, but much less than the general average, and not always less, but many times much less than the general average length of a print book. And that leads me into the third question. Do I want to write a long book or a short book? Well, of course the answer is you want to write one that's long enough to get your point across and to describe whatever it is you're talking about. You want to write one that is long enough that does capture the beginning, middle, and end of whatever story you're talking about. You certainly want to do that. But you can determine how long a book you want to. Now, later on, in a later session, I will delve into this some more and give some more specifics. But right now, I just want to talk generally about something that was described a few years ago and that still falls within the range of average lengths of books nowadays. I will say the trend is for books to be shorter than they used to be. In our information age and information overload, we want to get information as quickly as we can, and therefore books are not as expected to be as long as they were in the past. But here's the general observation, the general rule of thumb. Somebody discovered, all the D-Evers, creative writing instructors, came up with this length of book, and it was also discussed by perhaps the connection broke, and now we're back. Here is the general rule of thumb they came up with. They said that a chapter was considered to be about 10 pages long. Now, why was that? Well, they found out that a chapter was just about the right, of 10 pages, was just about the right size for somebody to be able to read a whole chapter on their lunch hour. It was a good size for people to be able to read shortly before they went to bed or before they went to sleep. And so they came up with that general rule of thumb of a book being about 10 pages long. And then they compared it to the average of books that were in print, and they found out that it held out generally pretty well. And so I just want to discuss, as our starting point, an average size book being about 200 pages long, and that would be a book of 20 chapters for a 200-page long book. Back in those days, they also discovered that certain mystery books were about 280 pages long on average, and they contained about 28 chapters. Likewise, novels, full-blown novels, were about 400 to 500 words long, or 400 to 500 pages long, which would consist of about 40 to 50 chapters. Well, so an average size book, though, if we're considering a nonfiction book of about 200 pages, would be a book that contains 20 chapters. Now, in speaking of ebooks, though, ebooks can be, well, I mentioned some of them are only 8 pages long, although that would, I guess, be more of a report. But 25 pages all the way up to the length of your print book. And the reason for that would be that in many cases, you would want your book to be both a print book and an ebook. In that case, an ebook would be the same length as your print book. But to go much shorter than that, down to 25 pages, that would be more in keeping with that of a digital book than a print book. So, let me say that a print book should be, on average, about 200 pages long, especially in the area of nonfiction. But a print book also, since we talk about them being shorter than they used to be in the past, another good rule of thumb is they should be 125 pages long at the least. And why is that? The reason for that is you want your title of your book and your name to be on the spine of the book. In order to do that, it would have to be about 120, 125 pages long. So we have talked about figuring out what kind of book you want to write. And here are the questions to ask for that. Do you want to write fiction or nonfiction? Do you want to write a print book or a digital book? And do you want to write a long book or a short book? Having some idea of what you're trying to do in these areas would be helpful. So, I hope you've enjoyed this session of Walking with Randy, and I hope that I get my other 1,000 steps in. Hope you're getting your steps in. And if you like more tips on writing like these, then go to randysblogs.com. Have a great, well, I guess for me it's evening, but I don't know what time you'll be watching this. So have a great evening or a great day until the next time I see you. Bye-bye.